Assalamu alaikum dear students. Today we are going to start a new unit of this course, that is inverse trigonometric function. Now what is trigonometric function? You know that simply the sine function, cos, tan, cosec, sec. If we consider these as the functions, these are real valued functions, and these functions are simply called as the trigonometric functions. Now you studied this in class 11th. Now if we consider the sine function, it is a function from R to R defined by f of x equals to sine x. This is called as the trigonometric function, that is sine trigonometric function. Now you know that its graph is like this. Its range is between interval 1 and minus 1 and 1. That is, its graph is this. Zeros of this sine function are at n pi. That is, at 0 the graph touches the x-axis, at pi its graph touches the x-axis, and at minus pi, so on and so forth, the graph touches or crosses the x-axis. Clearly from the graph it is not 1 1, because different elements have same images. Like here 0 value is 0, at pi value is again 0, at 2 pi value is 0, here at pi value is this, at pi by 2 value is 1, at 3 pi, this at minus 3 pi by 2 the value is again here the 1. So this means that it is not 1 1 function, it is not 1 1 function. Similarly it is not onto, because element is greater than 1, or the real number is greater than 1 and the real numbers less than 1 are not the image elements, or not the image elements. That is, it is not 1 1 function, it is not 1 1 function. Now if we restrict its codomain, that is from R to interval minus 1 to 1, interval minus 1 to 1, that is, if we consider the same function f from R to minus interval minus 1 to 1, then its graph is like this. Here the codomain x is up to this, it is the codomain x is only up to minus 1 to 1. So this means that here range equals to codomain. So clearly if we restrict its domain, codomain, from R to interval minus 1 to 1, it becomes onto. Now here it is, here onto function means surjective function, but still it is not 1 1 function, because different elements have same images. Like at these points the value of the function, or these points are mapped to one and only one point, that is 0, that is 0. Now if we consider the interval, this interval, interval minus pi by 2 to pi by 2, or another interval from minus 3 pi by 2 to pi by 2, or we can consider this as from pi by 2 to 3 pi by 2. So this means that in this interval the graph of this function, which is onto function, is like this. Now from minus pi to pi, from minus pi by 2 to pi by 2, the graph of this function looks like this. So clearly here this graph is the graph of the 1 1 and onto function, 1 1 and onto function. So here we restrict both its domain as well as codomain. Now if we restrict, consider this case, that is interval minus pi by 2 to pi by 2, that is when we consider the same function from minus pi by 2 to pi by 2, it is 1 1 onto, it is 1 1 onto. Now when it is 1 1 onto, so by the definition of inverse of a function, its inverse exists. Let us suppose that g is the function which is the inverse of the sine function, that is f of x equal to sine x. Then g is the function from minus 1 to 1, because minus 1 to 1 is the range of the sine function. So the range of its inverse is minus 1 to 1 to interval minus pi by 2 to pi by 2. And if we define this function by g of x equals to, or this function is defined by g of x equals to sine inverse x, x belongs to interval minus 1 to 1. This function g equals to sine inverse is called as the inverse of this sine function, or inverse of sine. We simply call this as arcsine function. This is called as the inverse of sine function, or inverse trigonometric function, or inverse sine trigonometric function. Similarly, we can we can restrict domain in any interval, like if we restrict the domain from pi by 2 to 3 pi by 2, from pi by 2 to 3 pi by 2, or we can restrict also the domain from minus 3 pi by 2 to minus pi by 2. In each and every interval of this type whose length is here simply pi, this function is invertible function, and all these functions are simply called as the arcsine functions. So arcsine function is simply the inverse of sine function, whose domain is actually in the interval in which the given sine function is 1 1 on 2. So inshallah, in tomorrow's video lecture we will discuss how to draw the graph of this inverse sine function. So thank you.